Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
What is living in the Hockomock Swamp area of Massachusetts? Could out-of-the-body experiences be trips to parallel worlds? How do parasitical entities take advantage of people?
Greetings and welcome to the 592nd edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I am Ben, and those brief questions came from my co-host and partner in the paranormal, my dad. And this evening we bring you an open line show to continue burrowing into our mile-high stack of emails. Numbers to call: 800-449-1240. That's anywhere in the U.S. or Canada, or 401-766-1240. That's locally. And don't forget about emails and stuff. That's Paul at BehindTheParanormal.com for emails.
Now, because we lost the podcast for the show 586 on May 11th, we're going to deal with the same questions we took on that show, because we know that most of our listeners are not in our broadcast area and listen by podcast. We also have, thank you, Ben, we also have had an issue with last week's podcast, the show with Alejandro Rojas, a very, very well-known UFO expert and journalist, and we are working on that, and we'll try to do so as far as getting it fixed as soon as possible. So we're off and running. Ben is kind of under the weather tonight, so I will do most of the reading now for these various emails. So let's go back to one we received in the wake of my coast-to-coast appearance on in early May. Okay, we usually get lots and lots of reaction to that. And here's one. We talked about flap areas, George Norrie and I, and flap areas are places where there are seemingly unrelated but many paranormal events that we believe have the same basis as far as the process by which they manifest. You know, you might have UFOs, cryptids, Bigfoot, that sort of thing, even ghost phenomena, and they don't seem to be connected, but really in a way they are because of the process behind it all. So one of these areas, it's actually in our listening area, is the so-called Bridgewater Triangle area of Massachusetts, Mansfield. In that area, it's about, it's really over 220 square miles. And in the midst of this is this Hockomock Swamp management area, state management area. And there are all sorts of interesting things that have occurred there since, really, the Native Americans began to notice it way back. So, and then, of course, the Europeans noticed it when they settled the area, and now it's still a prominent area for strange phenomena. Ben and I have been there ourselves and have seen a couple of strange things. So here's a letter from Jean, who lives on Cape Cod. And Jean writes, my husband grew up on West Center Street in West Bridgewater. That's in the area, West Bridgewater, Massachusetts. He was a very little boy when he had an incident. Their property abutted the swamp, that's the Hockomock Swamp, and his parents had a large, successful chicken farm at the time with large outbuildings. Now, because she gives her husband's age here, and I presume now this would be the early 1950s, because her husband and I are roughly the same vintage. One of the heaters, Jean continues, one of the heaters caught the chicken barn on fire in the middle of the night. All the adults, including his mother, ran outside, and the fire department was called. He got out of bed and came outside, and no one really noticed him. He told me that he saw a sort of thing/creature hiding behind a tree, watching this, and it saw him. He was scared out of his wits, and to this day, a vivid memory. This is a vivid memory. There were other incidents and sightings over the years, as that swamp was right behind the property his parents owned. Now, Jean sort of leaves us hanging there. I'd love to hear more about other sightings and things that occurred there, but I'll have to get in touch with her and ask for more information. One of the things that we believe is happening here in areas such as the Hockomock Swamp, and there are plenty of other areas around the world where this occurs, is that our point of view is not based on spiritualism. It's based on the fringe areas of physics, which I think are the best ways to explain what I've seen in the paranormal over the past 45 years. And that is that you have intersects of parallel realities. All right? And this is good science, depending on how you interpret it. We don't live in just one world, and we've talked about this many times. There are many parallel realities where all possibilities seem to exist. And there are many ways to interpret that, but we feel that that explains most paranormal phenomena. You may have an area, and especially where there seems to be a lot of water, an area where these intersects occur. And you will have strange creatures that are not familiar to us, perhaps coming in and out from parallel worlds. They may not even know what they're doing, because very often they seem just as confused as we are. And there are boundaries that can be crossed, energy can be exchanged. It's an open system. On television, you may remember the show, it was Quantum Leap, and there was some other one. And Hollywood never really quite gets it right. I mean, they leap from one world to another, and it was sort of a closed system. In other words, one world was self-contained, and you could leap to another one, and where things were just a little bit different, and maybe you had a different job, or you hadn't been born yet, or you died 30,000 years before. All those things occur in the multiverse, as it's called. But you might not have the same. It will be a closed system. But now it seems that it's not a closed system. Things do come back and forth. Energy is exchanged. And you have things like the Bridgewater Triangle and all these seemingly odd and unrelated things that occur there. Other examples that Ben and I have researched are in Rendlesham Forest area in England, in Suffolk, England, where the best-known phenomenon was the appearance and landings of various UFOs in December 1980 in the presence of Air Force personnel, including high-ranking officers, at two bases that straddled this forest area. We've been there. Strange things have happened. And it has a history of all sorts of odd things going back to Saxon times, way back, several thousand years, in some of the most extreme cases that have been reported. And people still have odd experiences there. So this is another flap area. Certainly the Mothman incident, so-called, as called by the press, in the mid-1960s in the Ohio Valley of the United States is another example. We've been down there as well, and we've spoken with witnesses who had a lot of things happening besides the appearance of the so-called Mothman, which is a very odd creature with wings that flew at 100 miles an hour and chased people and scared them to death. And on rare occasions seemed to help people as well. So very strange thing. And this is all what we're talking about. So I'd like to hear more from Jean about that. I'll be in touch with her. I'll let you know what she may report on any further incidents that her husband witnessed there. But it is an ongoing case as far as we're concerned. Now here's another one. This is from Mary in New York City. And Mary writes, "Dear Paul and Ben, I often cruise through coast to coast." And that's the radio show I was on that prompted half of these. It's a large national show with George Noory, 570 stations syndicated in the middle of the night. So you'd be surprised the people who listen to the radio at 3 o'clock in the morning. So Mary writes, "I often cruise through coast to coast and recently ran across your names and website. From my current research and experiences, I found your theory of the paranormal spot on. Last year I took the theory that I just described about this multiverse idea." And Mary continues, "Last year I took a class with a friend at the International Academy of Consciousness," I'm not familiar with that, "and read their book entitled Demystifying the Out-of-Body Experience by Louis Monero. Him I've heard of. I feel that much of the information gleaned from their OBEs, it's out-of-the-body experience acronym, of course, is similar to your experiences and insights. My friend and I have had a few OBE experiences ourselves since taking the class. At this point, when we leave our bodies, we are in a version of our home. It's never our current home, and we have yet to see our own body sleeping in the bed." That's something that people very often report when they have these so-called out-of-the-body experiences, if that's what they actually are. They find themselves floating above the operating table, say, when they're being operated on in a medical situation in a hospital, or when they're just simply sleeping. They're up by the ceiling and they look down upon their bodies. That's the common experience, but that was not Mary's experience. "We encounter family members in our OBEs, both dead and alive, and at various ages. We wondered why this occurred and what it meant. From your research, I feel the pieces of the puzzle are coming together. Recently, I read Stephen Hawking's theory," Stephen Hawking being the great British physicist, that there are astrophysicist, that there were wormholes everywhere. I'm sorry I have to keep stopping and explaining things, but in cosmology and astrophysics, wormholes are supposedly tunnels from one part of the universe or the multiverse to another, and you can use them. They occur naturally because it's all part of nature, and you could theoretically take a spaceship and travel very quickly from, say, our solar system to one far away, that if you went in a straight line would take you a zillion years, and you can do it very quickly through one of these wormholes. That's a very simplified explanation of what a wormhole is, but that's the idea. All right, back to Mary's letter. Okay, wormholes everywhere except our bodies are too heavy to go through them. That's another part of this series. So I'm thinking that when we detach from our bodies through OBEs, our consciousness then is light enough to go through various wormholes, taking us to certain multiverses, question marks. Anyway, I would love your insight on all this. Okay, well, thank you, Mary. A lot of interesting ideas. Do you feel up? Are you quite up to responding, Ben? No, okay. As I say, Ben's running the board today, but he's not feeling too good. So, all right. The idea of, first of all, to begin to discuss this, you have to assume that, and we don't like assumptions because people make too many of them in the paranormal, that OBEs, or out-of-the-body experiences, are you actually separating from your body. So the question is, well, what is your body doing in the meantime? And number two, what is it that's separating from it? We have trouble with this philosophical point of view that looks at ourselves this way, that looks at our beings this way, because we don't like dualism. In other words, you've got matter and energy, you've got body and soul. I mean, yeah, and maybe we do, but we sort of look in the paranormal at human beings as a unity, so that you don't necessarily have the body being separated from the soul during an OBE. Again, maybe you do, but I tend to think there's another explanation. And that explanation resides in the notion that we are already living in parallel lives, such as you may visit in an OBE, as Mary suggests, and you're already there. You don't have to travel really anywhere. It's your consciousness that simply shifts. It's, for example, if you hear a noise and you look somewhere else. You don't see what you were looking at in the first place. You see the new thing that was making the noise. I mean, it might be just as simple as that. So as we discuss this, you might want to bear that in mind, that we are sort of one being, in our opinion, across this multiverse, living in many of these parallel worlds, and that seems to be what the situation is. And to us, the OBE may be something entirely different from separating from your body. We do have a call. And I believe, hello, is this Willie? I don't know.
Hey, Paul, it's me, Willie Miranda. How are you?
Oh, Willie Miranda. We did expect Willie's call, and Willie's going to tell us about a very important conference coming up in New England. Ben and I will be speakers there. And Willie, tell us about what's happening on September 5th and 6th.
Well, first of all, let me start by wishing you a belated Happy Father's Day.
Oh, thank you very much, Willie. I appreciate that.
And yes, Susan McNeil Spooler and I will be heading the 2015 Greater New England UFO Conference on October 17th. And our keynote speaker will be Richard Dolan. And we will also have Mark D'Antonio. Hopefully by then he'll be 100%.
Yeah, we're going to see him in the hospital this week.
Yeah, he was in pretty good spirits when Susan and I went to see him.
Yes, and thank you for letting us know about it. Because I'll explain to the listeners after the call what's going on, because they know Mark.
Oh, okay, great. And we're also going to be having Jan Harzan. He's going to be flying down, and he also will be speaking on the 46-year history of MUFON.
Okay, the Mutual UFO Network, a great organization.
Correct.
One of the few things to which I belong. Yeah.
Oh, do you?
I do. Yes. We're not joiners, but Ben doesn't belong. I do, and I thought that we were speaking at UFO conferences in the last few years. I should join it, and it's a great group.
No, it is. It really is. It really is, and I'm pretty sure that Jan is going to be also touching base on the new MUFON show, Hangar One.
Oh yes, it's already started. Yep.
Yep. And I'm pretty sure they're going to be going on to their second season. So it'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And also Richard Dolan spends a lot of time on that show also.
Yes.
So so it's going to be I believe it's going to be a pretty good conference, pretty strong conference. We're also going to be having Ronnie LeBlanc and Bill Penning. They're two Leominster residents. Bill Penning actually came out in Finding Bigfoot, the first season.
Mm-hmm.
And they did an episode on Bigfoot sightings in Rhode Island, and also in central Massachusetts, out in the Leominster State Forest.
Yeah.
Ronnie LeBlanc right now is in the process of writing a book on Monsterland, which is like a folklore area around here. It's got a lot of history.
Oh, we'll have to have him on about that.
And excuse me?
We'll have to have him on the show.
Oh yes. That's definitely it'll be a good interview, because Bill Penning and Ronnie LeBlanc, they're really good speakers.
Mm-hmm.
They really are. And we're also going to be having Ray Hernandez. I'm pretty sure you know Ray.
I know Ray. Yep.
Yep.
From the
And
Foundation
have you met him
for.
yet?
I'm sorry.
Have you met him yet?
No, we've spoken on the phone a number of times. He was recently retired as director of the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Experiences, and so I'll look forward to meeting him. Yeah. So who are the other speakers? We have Stan Friedman.
Yeah. No. We're gonna have Roxy Zerwicker.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Yes. She's also going to be speaking, and we're also going to have Bill Wall.
Mm-hmm.
Confirmed him as a speaker also.
Okay.
And pretty sure they're probably going to have also Peter Robbins joining us that night.
Good. Okay.
Yes. Peter's an eloquent speaker.
He is. He's a real gentleman too. Yeah.
Yes, he is. And hopefully we'll have looking forward to having a good showing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And of course we're going to be highlighting some interviews. We're going to be doing a local cable access show up in Westford, Mass.
Mm-hmm.
And we're hoping to interview you and all the speakers.
Mm-hmm. Sure. No, just let us know when and where. So this is going to be October 17th. I gave the wrong date, so that's a different conference. October 17th at the City Hall in Leominster, Massachusetts, right on the edge of our listening area. And where can people find out more information, Willie?
Well, they could type in the Greater New England UFO Conference on their web browser or on Google.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll be able to find the latest updates on the website.
Good. Okay. And we'll be having you again, you and Susan, or Susan, as we proceed toward the date to continue to promo this. And people can find information and links on our website as well. And we'll be, keeping people well informed. But Willie, thank you so much, and we'll look forward to seeing you there and to talking to you in the meantime.
Thank you for the opportunity, Paul.
Okay,
Have a
Willie.
great evening.
Thank you. Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Okay, so, all right, so I'll go back to our letters here, and we're talking about out-of-the-body experiences and what really happens. So you may be separating from your body some kind of essence of yourself, but we have a philosophical problem with that because, without your body, are you still you, really? Wouldn't you be less than yourself? Because if you don't look at it in a dualistic way, you have to be a wholeness, and if you do separate, then you're not really there. I think a better explanation, in our opinion, is that you're experiencing parallel worlds where you already are. Mary mentions in her letter a version of their home. I've heard this before. Things are not quite where they are supposed to be. The home may be a different color. We get emails on this kind of thing all the time. I remember that there are people who, I remember one particular experience in England. A man came out of his house and he was in an entirely different neighborhood. And he spent part of the day there. He ended up at the police station. Nobody knew who he was. And all of a sudden he had kind of blacked out. And there he was, walking down the street in his own neighborhood as he remembered it. So there are many, many different parallel realities, apparently, with many different versions of you, your loved ones, what you see and what you see around you and hear is not necessarily what you get. There could be different versions of that. Mary also mentions running into friends and loved ones, family members, both dead and alive. one of the reasons for ghosts, in our opinion, and it is a real phenomenon, but I don't think people interpret it correctly all the time. They think, again, that someone is separated from their body and the remnant is still running around. Well, I don't think that's good enough. I think that this parallel world idea is a far better explanation, because at times your consciousness may have access to or be aware of places beyond the boundaries of some of these worlds where a loved one has not died. They may have died in your own daily consciousness stream that we very narrowly are conscious of from day to day, but not somewhere or someone else. People have time slips. They find themselves in the past or even in the future. And sure, some of them may be nuts, but most are not. Some are professional people who come to us and say that this is what had happened and they don't want anybody else to know about it, or there are issues of other kinds that indicate that these are perhaps real experiences, or they experienced something that they interpreted in this way. So I think, again, it's the first day of school, as we often say, and thank you, Mary, for your interesting letter. And I think we may have to look at OBEs in a very kind of different way. All right, now here is one from JT, and JT does not say where he... Oh, Oklahoma City. JT is from Oklahoma City. All right. Hi, I have read both Footsteps in the Attic and Faces at the Window. Okay, I have to say it's the closest to describing what I feel about the paranormal. When I was 7 years old, my sister and her friends played with a Ouija board. Not a good idea, folks. And as I watched, the board for some reason only answered questions about me. My entire life I have been bothered, not really tormented, but just annoyed by mild poltergeist phenomena. I have never at any time felt it had anything to do with dead people, but rather it wants people to think that the things that happen to me, still do sometimes, were just too strange to put into words. Also, I got so sick of everything paranormal, or every paranormal group saying, it's your grandma. No, it's not my grandma. Your theory about parasites is pretty much how I came to feel, that it found the perfect vehicle to exist by using scenes of tragedy and people at their most vulnerable to take advantage of. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you, JT. Just to explain one or two of the things that are in here. People refer to the Ouija board. I mean, if OUIJA, it's supposed to be a parlor game. It's still sold by several game companies that I've been after for decades to get rid of it, and they don't listen to me. But it's a board about the size of a standard game board, and it has what's called a planchette, which is something you put your fingers on, and it kind of slides across to spell out words and letters, which are what are printed on this so-called game board. All right, and there are different forms of it, but the most common one is what I just described. The last time I used one was in, I believe it was 1966, and I was in grammar school, of course, and I was over at a friend's house, and he had received one for his birthday. Thanks, parents. And we sat there using it. I didn't know anything about it at the time, and it answered certain questions, and our fingers would be on the thing, and it would slide around to spell words, and there are numbers as well. And then we asked it when we would die. And it said that my friend would die in 1986. And he did. He died in a diving accident in Narragansett Bay, Rhode Island, in, I believe it was May or June of that year. It said I have a couple more years to go, but pretty much, and it's not that I believe this. And what is it? Is it a spirit? Is it some ghost? Was it grandma? Well, it didn't say what it was. But I've had some experience with people who have used this and have caused all sorts of problems in their homes. Something was stirred up. The Ouija board is a sledgehammer that I think will punch through the boundaries of the parallel worlds we've been discussing. And it sort of also is a dinner bell for negative entities that we call parasites, that are responsible for our folklore about demons and evil spirits and things of this kind. And they do fill the bill. They are not spirits, in our opinion, and certainly not in my experience. They are they're life forms, living things, I believe even physical ones in their own worlds, that have access very easily to other parallel realities where they can feed on the energy of the inhabitants there. Sounds pretty wild, but that's what we see. Nature is very versatile. their life always finds some method for expressing itself and for prospering. Microbes have been found in the cores of nuclear reactors. Now, how inhospitable an environment can you imagine? And as a result, I think that life, not only in these many worlds, is tenacious, and it is the rule rather than the exception. I think that life between the worlds may even be kind of the rule, and these parasites seem to be able to do that. I found them particularly, I'm thinking of a case in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania in 2004, when I found parasites, one parasite at least, active in one world where a murder was taking place, reaching into a second world where two young girls were living in an apartment together and having all kinds of problems, and into a third world where the things that the ghosts, that the girls thought were ghosts haunting the apartment, were actually people just living their lives in a parallel reality, and they would be seen as transparent figures and this kind of thing. And they would see the girls living in the apartment as transparent figures and thought they were ghosts. This is the sort of thing we're dealing with here, when you look at it. So parasitical entities seeming to reach beyond boundaries, several at a time. Ben and I ran into that in the haunted policeman case in Vermont, beginning in 2005, a case we're still monitoring. So this is the kind of thing I think we're dealing with, and I think that JT is one of the people who's starting to really get how this goes. You can't take anything in the paranormal at face value. So good job there, JT. Keep listening and let us know what's going on. All right, we're going to take our bottom of the hour break here. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley. We'll be right back.
Hi, everyone. This is your Mater D in the Tiki Bar, Joe Callahan, inviting you into the Tiki Bar every Tuesday night from 6 until 7 p.m. It's nothing but the best in Jimmy Buffett music for the full hour, 6 to 7 Tuesday nights, right here on ON Radio. The Tiki Bar is brought to you by Papa John's Pizza, 1049 Cass Avenue on the corner of Mendon Road here in Woonsocket. Remember, better ingredients, better pizza, Papa John's. It's the Tiki Bar right here on ON 1240 WOON Woonsocket Radio every Tuesday night from 6 to 7.
And welcome back. And we usually at this point talk about various charities Ben and I have adopted, but we'll do that at the end of the show in our announcements. So we'll continue reading with our open lines here. And let me give you our phone numbers again. Open line supposedly means phone calls, but we usually use it for emails. But you can call in. The number, of course, from anywhere in the U.S. and Canada, 800-449-1240, or locally 401-766-1240 in the Blackstone Valley of Rhode Island here. And so let's continue. This one is it's very difficult to see what the name is. Okay, but oh yeah, this is the sort of thing we receive relatively frequently, and you have to kind of give people the benefit of the doubt. All right. So I took out part of the beginning here because it wasn't really relevant, but this is someone who's writing in that my angels tell me there are about 90 million of these entities, meaning parasites, on the planet and responsible for most of the evil created here. Okay, I will just take this one sentence at a time. Now, there are lots of people who believe they're in contact with paranormal entities and angels in this case. And from what I've seen in the paranormal, it sounds crazy. It sounds like these people are nuts. And maybe they are sometimes. But I just, having seen what I've seen, you have to at least consider that these things are possible. Moving around in paranormal circles and approaching it from this multiversal viewpoint that we always do, we've run into entities that seem benign, that are not human, and do seem to occupy parallel worlds. And you have to be very, very careful to keep your feet on the ground, to have a sensible interpretation, but also to remember that human logic and the human paradigm is not good enough to explain any of these things. And when people experience these things, they aren't necessarily crazy. When I worked in psychiatric hospitals as a seminary student and as a grad student in psychology, Ogdensburg, New York, and Norwich, Connecticut, I was able to deal with many patients who had been, certainly diagnosed as schizophrenic. And there are many aspects to schizophrenia, and several different kinds of it, of course. But one of the common phenomena is that they hear voices and see things. Very often they believe they're in other realities and things of this kind. Well, many of these people were of searing intelligence, very, very brilliant people, some of them. And others were experiencing horrible worlds, but many of the very intelligent ones seemed to actually to be in contact with realities that we couldn't see and they could. And as I've mentioned several times, I've addressed groups of psychiatrists on this on several occasions, and they will get all upset. I don't have any particular love for psychiatrists, but many of them would get all upset when I'd mention the possibility that this is not necessarily a chemical imbalance in the brain, that these people may be experiencing real parallel worlds. But several came up to me, actually a large number in one case came up one by one and said, I think you've got something there. I've suspected the same thing, but if I say that, I'll lose my job. So there is just as much, I suppose, just as much politicking in science as there is in medicine as there is anywhere else, and human nature means that science is not always reliable, or that its agents are always to be trusted or always get it right. Matter of fact, our good friend Stanton Friedman, whom you see practically every time you turn on the History Channel on UFO shows, wrote a book with our good friend Kathleen Marden, both of whom have been on the show many times. The book was entitled "Science Was Wrong," and it's really thick, and it goes through all sorts of examples in history when the science was wrong about this or that on various issues when it shouldn't have been wrong, and it was difficult to correct the errors. So that's a good book. Science Was Wrong. So anyway, moving on here. Certainly 90 million of these entities on the planet. Well, I don't know if there's any number, and I don't know if they're on the planet as opposed to being in sort of parallel realities. So, okay. So there we are as far as that's concerned. We don't really count numbers. I mean, there's an old theological joke that theology, the study of things religious, can be silly when they start debating how many angels can sit on the head of a pin. That actually occurred at one point in the Middle Ages, right? So we're not interested in numbers here. We're interested in effects and that kind of thing. And they do seem to come and go. All right, now to continue here with this letter. We've also been able to remove ghosts and other entities from people's houses using the same protocol. I'm not quite clear on that, mainly because I don't know who's really writing this. The angels point out that people afflicted with these parasites to me on my journey. So whoever this is says that the guardian entities will point out parasites where they are, and yeah, I suppose that's possible. I don't know. So that's about. Oh, I'm sorry. There is a name here. It's Dino, D-I-N-O. Okay. Well, thank you, Dino, for writing, and we'll let people make their own judgments on that. And anything is possible. So here's another one. This is from Garen, and Garen does not say where he is from. Or Gary, not Garen, Gary. Wow, this is a historical question. I don't know how this got in here. I made a passing reference to Abraham Lincoln on the Coast to Coast show, I believe, or on one of our shows. And I've discussed this with Gary, I should say, with email. And because under my other hat, I'm a historical writer as well. So let's move on then. This is from Trish, and I do not know where Trish is from. As I say, Ben is here with us tonight, but he's under the weather, so I'm kind of trying to handle the verbal parts here. I know it's not possible to really know the answer, but thought you may have heard of something with your knowledge of paranormal history. Oh, this is a really dark one, so I warn you in advance. The reason I ask is my husband was possessed, and before attempting to kill me, he hung himself. I wasn't sure until I researched, and based on what I witnessed and barely survived, I'm almost certain this was the case. So the question is that really of possession and how it affects people's actions, their attitudes toward their close ones and toward themselves and this sort of thing. And it is a common question. The whole issue of possession is approached generally with assumptions, just like everything else in the paranormal is. And these assumptions tend to be based on sort of what you might call pop theology. All right, things that are more or less taught in religion in one way and are very often understood in another way by the people who follow that particular religion. I don't think parasites which are, again, the basis for our beliefs about demons, really have all that much to do with religion. Religion can be a tool, of course, for positive energy to be applied through our own abilities that can help deflect the attentions of parasites and can help bring families together and reduce the food supply or eliminate it. And the food supply being negative energy that people produce when we're upset or angry or fearful or not getting along with each other, things of this kind. And the entire parasite situation can lead to the poltergeist phenomenon that I've experienced several times. Ben hasn't had the pleasure yet, as far as I know. And also the phenomenon that we know as possession, which apparently seems to be a melding to some degree of the personalities of a human and an entity of negative intent. And I've seen this. I've been present at 10 different exorcisms, not for many years now, but when I was assisting a priest at this during my seminary years. Now, the problem here, of course, was that interpreted correctly? Several of these exorcisms didn't work. And I think if you take strictly this religious approach that you're dealing with a servant of Satan that is possessing a human being who is a child of God, that you can approach it that way, that can be the solution. Well, sometimes it is, but sometimes it isn't. Because I think what we're really dealing with are what we've been discussing in some of these letters, the parasitical entities that are simply parts of nature and are living beings, life forms, and probably very physical in their own worlds of origin, and they are able to come in and feed, as we discussed. I think that's what's happening. When a possession occurs, in my opinion, today, what's happening is that there is a certain, and this is where we get into us existing in many different forms throughout these various universes, right, the parallel worlds. And when we have that occurring, we also can reach a place where the parasite can sort of meet us and is a part of us because we share our identities at times even with these parasites. In other words, in a very, very alien world where your consciousness lives in a different form, you could be this parasite, and probably are, and that's how, very, very weird, very, very wild, but that's what I saw in these cases. And you can have this sort of bonding with an aspect of yourself, which is this parasite, an independent creature, but nevertheless sort of is kind of one with you. It's like, in the good end of that, it's like when you meet someone for the first time and you really hit it off. I've seen this happen. People have asked me about it. Someone you never saw before, might even be a different age, from a different place, nothing overtly in common, but you just somehow hit it off. You're kindred spirits. Well, you might be more kindred than you realize. In a close parallel world, you might be actually sharing an identity and be the same person. That's all part of this aspect of this kind of physics. All right, and it's interpreted in different ways by many people, but that seems to be what it's like. Okay, so the woman believes her husband was possessed before attempting to harm her and killing himself. Okay, that is something, unfortunately, that I believe is entirely possible. The letter continues from Trish. I wasn't sure until I researched, and based on what I witnessed and barely survived, I'm almost certain this was the case. Well, she may be right. Since his passing, the harassment has continued, harassment presumably by parasites. That's very possible. First, it was things like his cologne smell appearing on all my clothes. Smells, or olfactory phenomena, as they would be known formally, are very common in many kinds of paranormal phenomena that may or may not have anything to do with parasites, or may or may not be quote-unquote demonic. Sometimes I've heard from people who said, well, their father always smoked a pipe, and then when he passed or translated, as we say, to another consciousness, you could still smell the pipe smoke in the living room, right? And this kind of really spooked them out, and is he still here? Is it his ghost? And I mean, no, of course not. It's just, you've got a thin world boundary there, and he's still smoking the pipe. And the letter continues. Then in my dreams, where I am hunted by him, this is a real terrible situation psychologically here, obviously, and he still looks possessed with the black eyes and changed face. I don't know if this is my post-traumatic stress or actual harassment. Any info would be appreciated. Well, I would say, Trish, that why don't you write us anything further that occurs? I think you need to bring in some more positive energy to that place. I don't know anything about you. I don't know where you live, but try to be positive. Try to come together with your loved ones and your close ones, and try to build up some strength there, and that will protect you or help protect you from any sort of parasitical attack or something of this kind. It really does work. Love really is the answer in this case. And we have a caller. We have Susan. Hello, Susan. Welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
How are you? Thank you so much. It's good to talk to you today.
Sure. What's cooking?
And thank you. Oh, well, I had a business meeting and I got out of it early. That's why I had Willie call earlier.
Oh, Susan. Okay, this is Susan also from the Greater New England UFO Conference. Yeah, we talked to Willie before, yep.
Yes, and so I just wanted to call to just kind of embellish upon the speakers and the hotels and the arrangements that we'll be making for people.
Sounds
will
good.
Be coming from out of the area.
Okay.
So we're working in conjunction with the local DoubleTree. It used to be DoubleTree at the Hilton, and it used to be a Sheraton over by the intersection of Route 2 and 12 in Leominster, Massachusetts.
Okay.
And we're also working with a couple of other local hotels and carving out some discounted rooms that people can reserve prior to the event. So we'll be putting those on our website, which is newenglandufo.com.
Good. Okay. Yeah, we have a link to that on our show site, behindtheparanormal.com, and we'll be promoting this as we go. So what else is going on at the conference this year?
Well, we're very excited to have Richard Dolan for our keynote speaker, and Bill Hall has agreed to also be one of our speakers, and he's excited to. He said he was going to come up and see you anyways. And so
that's going to be. Bill is a dear friend of ours. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I was. We were touched to find out that he's dedicating or has dedicated his new book, The Haunted House Diaries, to us. Because we put him onto the case. Yeah, that's kind of an awe, situation. So.
I did. If these are people in your audience here that know Mark D'Antonio, we could give the address for where he's.
I think that would be wonderful. We wanted to do that anyway. Yes, I'll give you some background on that, folks. Mark D'Antonio, of course, being a dear friend of ours and the Mutual UFO Network's National Director of video and photo analysis, and a bona fide astronomer, was supposed to meet me about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago in Torrington, Connecticut, at the house that's the center of the book that Bill Hall just wrote, the case Ben and I have been working since 2005, and we were going to do a drone flight over this really mysterious place that we think might house some sort of secret base, believe it or not. There was military activity around. And Susan heard me talk on this last year at the conference. And Mark didn't show. And phone calls, emails, and that wasn't like him. Turns out he had a serious medical problem and was in the hospital. And it happened so quickly that we weren't able to find out about it. So Ben and
his wife didn't have the code, his password to his phone. So she couldn't get in there and answer any phone calls or retrieve any calls because he wasn't. We were frantic, but fortunately now we found out what's going on. So why don't you give us the address in New Britain, Connecticut, where people can send cards? Sure. Mark D'Antonio, Mark with a C, M-A-R-C. D'Antonio is D-A-N-T-O-N-I-O, and he's at the hospital for special care in the Medical Rehab Center, and he's in room 1255, A as in apple. Okay. And the address is 2150 Corbin, C-O-R-B-I-N, Avenue, and that is in New Britain, Connecticut. And the zip code is 06053. And they do have a phone number. They have a phone number, the main number. You can always try to ask to speak to him. At this point, he doesn't have a phone in his room, but he may in the future here. But the number there is 860-223-2761. And for those that are local that would like to pay him a visit, visiting hours are from 12 p.m. from lunchtime until 8 p.m. at night.
Okay, great. And I might suggest that if people want to contact him through us, send us emails or give us calls, because Ben and I will be seeing him before the end of this week, and we'll be very happy to pass on any messages for anyone who can't go personally. But Mark, a wonderful fellow.
He is. We Willie and I went down to see him Thursday afternoon, and he was looking well.
Would you believe I was there on Tuesday with a friend visiting some family graves, and I didn't even know he was 2 blocks away?
Well, see, and isn't that funny? And it was just through Michael Melton, Michael that has a show out of Philadelphia.
Oh yeah.
Am I not saying his name correctly? And he was the one that initially had posted about Mark, and then I followed up with a couple of other people, and then called the facility because he was transferred out of a hospital out of New York City up to Connecticut.
Yeah, he was at Mount Sinai, I guess. But Susan, thank you so much for informing us, because we'd still be looking for him.
Sure. Yeah. See.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
so I'm happy that we're all in touch with each other. And his wife was deeply moved that he was receiving so many cards, and they said how were people finding out where he was, and he was so appreciative. His wall in his room is starting to fill up with cards, which is really nice.
That's great. We're going to be bringing one ourselves.
I accused him of going through other people's rooms and stealing the cards.
Oh, that's funny. Well, Susan, thanks very much again. And give us the date once again, October 17th. And
Saturday, October 17th in Leominster, Massachusetts. Looks like Leominster, Leo.
Everybody around here knows Leominster, yeah.
Oh, good, okay. Where Benny Andreasen first had her abductions. And
right.
I swear that it's a hotbed, or there's something about the area that attracts this activity.
Yeah. Heard a lot of stories. So we're looking forward to it. Well, Susan, thanks a million, and we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Take care, Paul, and thank you, Ben. We'll talk with you soon.
Very good.
Bye-bye now.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll finish up Trish's letter here, just wishing her the best and asking her to keep us kind of posted on what's going on here. And there's also a little bit of a warning. You don't want to misinterpret things because they may not even be paranormal, strange little occurrences and things. It's difficult to draw the line, or there may be a component of something that's odd because of where you are or who you are sometimes. But just keep your feet on the ground. That's the important thing, and keep it positive. All right. Okay, now here's an interesting one, and those of you who are watching on a computer, which probably isn't very many of you, I'll show this on the webcam, but this is from Frank, and I don't know where Frank is from. I think he might be from the south somewhere. Paul, have you ever seen a handprint like this? And he sends a photograph. I don't know if it is a handprint or a footprint, but it is not human. I found this inside my theater room, which is a one-room house that I have always kept closed and locked. I always keep closed and locked. No one else had access to this room. The pillow was lying on the side of the sofa. And here's the picture. Ben's going to hold it up to the webcam in case anyone is in a position to see it. And I will describe it for the rest. It has 1, 2, 3, 4. It looks as though it's got 4 fingers going one way and another 4 going the other way, 3 or 4, almost like an animal print. And I have, the closest I've seen to this was under one of our bushes at our home, when there had been a report of a gray. That's the classic alien sort of being that people often report. Now, I don't know whether it really was or what, but there had been a report, and then sure enough, there were these sort of odd footprints underneath our window. Now, this kind of reminds me of that, but I really can't say. So yes, to answer the question, Frank's question, I have seen things like this, but this looks like it was made on a pillow with there was powder or something on the hands, and I don't know. I think what we can do is post this on our Talking Points page for this show, which has not been posted yet, and see what we can do with that. So in the meantime, we have, I wanted to mention that we are dealing as quickly as we can with our late I suppose our recent podcast problem. The station here just switched over computer systems, and that might have been part of it. And we have one from last week that we cannot seem to upload, and we will try to take care of that. Really great show with Alejandro Rojas. And we're repeating many of the questions on this show that we couldn't get, that we got to on May 11th, but weren't able to put up for podcast because the podcast was lost because of a technical glitch. So anyway, I think we've probably time for one more. And this is Mark from Tucson, Arizona, writes to us on Facebook, and you can do that, Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno Facebook page. So Mark from Tucson writes, some paranormal, quote, experts come across as very stupid. Not you two. How do these people get where they get in this field? What kind of background do you have to be considered an expert? Well, Mark, that's a good question. We don't like to criticize others, but there are times when you really just can't help it. What kind of background do you need? Well, some of these people, I think, just the common bio for many of the people who are in this field, in the pop paranormal realm, as we might call it, the hobbyist branch of this, the bio will start out, well, I grew up in a haunted house, or I've been interested in this for many years, or this happened to me when I was a child. Well, that's fine, but just because you've watched brain surgery occur doesn't mean you can do it. So, and I think that these people, again, when they see these things, they don't know what they're seeing, and if it really is paranormal, they don't understand it because they have the old 19th century ideas about what it is, and the assumption after assumption after assumption will take place. So I don't know really what background they have. They start groups, they give themselves titles, you know, the first deputy assistant investigator, the chief investigator, and all this kind of business, and I just think that's rather silly. I mean, when I started out in the early 1970s, or actually 1970 itself, there wasn't any such phenomenon at the time. You just sort of, there weren't very many people doing this. Ed and Lorraine Warren were increasingly prominent because they were among the few people doing it, and people were interested in the subject. But people might ask you, well, who was I to start doing this? Well, I was a seminary student, and there were religious connotations to this, certainly at the time, and there are even still. Because it reaches to the essence of perhaps what reality really might be, and has messages really for you. I shouldn't use that term, I suppose. It has indications of things that about God and reality and ourselves that are found in the paranormal that may give us clues to how we should live our lives and what's really going on. But of course, that can be, you can take that and run away with it. So again, paranormal experts. I prepared. Actually, one seminary faculty that I had in sort of the mid-seminary years was very sympathetic to this. They set up special courses for me, and I was doing work in the psychiatric hospital, and this really helped. And I was working with some great people, Father John Nicola, etc. I don't have to give you my resume; it's on our website. But that was my background. But as far as other people, I don't know. We tend to like people who have studied psychology, philosophy, and physics to work in this field, because there are implications for all three. So I don't know, Mark, how these people get where they get. Maybe they know somebody in the media and all this business, but that seems to be just about how they get there. And the people who are on TV, I don't even want to comment on that. All right. So, okay, we got 3 minutes left. Let's get to our announcements. Thank you all those who wrote in, and we're sorry we didn't get those questions sooner. On Saturday, September 5th, we're scheduled to speak, Ben and I, once again at the Exeter UFO Festival in Exeter, New Hampshire. It's a town-wide event organized by the local Kiwanis Club to benefit local children's charities. It's free. You can come in. The whole town gets involved. It's a barrel of fun. It's really great. Speakers besides ourselves will include the great Stanton Friedman, whom you've heard on the show many times, and Richard Dolan, who was also going to be at the conference we've been discussing with our callers tonight. Kathleen Martin, niece of Betty and Barney Hill, the subjects of the great 1961 abduction case in Exeter, and Jennifer Stein, whom we do not know but whom we look forward to meeting. And we'll provide information as the date approaches for that event. On Thursday, September 24th, Ben and I will join Bill Hall, author of the forthcoming book, The Haunted House Diaries, which we've discussed, for a joint book event at Hank's Restaurant in Brooklyn, Connecticut. Hank's has great food, and it'll be a lot of fun, and we'll get you some information about that as we go, because it's coming up fast. On Saturday, October 10th, Ben and I once again will be speakers at the Greater New England UFO Conference at City Hall in Leominster, Mass. Willie and Susan, who called in tonight separately, discussed that. It's going to be a really exciting event, and watch for more information on that on our website and on GreaterNewEnglandUFO.com. Visit our show website at BehindTheParanormal.com, where you'll find all that information, plus nearly 600 free podcasts of past shows from both ON 1240 and our 4.5-year run on CBS Radio, along with special shows and podcasts. You'll find my books on Amazon.com, Amazon Kindle, and Barnes & Noble Nook. That includes Faces at the Window, Footsteps in the Attic, and Turning Home, God, Ghosts, and Human Destiny. But if you buy them directly at BehindTheParanormal.com, I'll be happy to sign them for you. You'll help us keep all those podcasts free. We also mentioned, too, our charities we adopted, USACares.org, CanadianVeteransAdvocacy.org, Youth Mentoring Connection, YouthMentoring.org in Los Angeles, doing great things out there. And certainly 2 new books of interest. You can find those on our website, The Bell Witch Project and UFO Repeaters, which deals also with, has a whole chapter on our good friend Joe Ferrier, who was at this station, ON 1240, for many, many years as a talk show host. Both books are available on Amazon.com. Next Monday, June 29th, we'll welcome New Hampshire-based broadcasters Willie Hassel and Lynn Nickerson right here in studio. They had Spirit Chasers Paranormal for one of our rare looks at the state of that kind of paranormal research. And now that we've badmouthed everybody in that field, we're going to have some of the better ones as guests next week. So check that out. I'm Paul Eno, and Ben is going to. I'll say Ben Eno's sitting here, but he's under the weather. So talk to you next week.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.